My brother butt-dialed me while my family laughed about using me, and I decided right then that I would play the recording at his wedding. My name is Ashley, and for 28 years, I've been the reliable one, the fixer, the human safety net for my family. It was a role I never auditioned for, but was given the day my dad, Arthur, got sick. They used me for 28 years, laughing about my generosity over a $5,000 floral arch. But I recorded it all. Subscribe and leave a like to see how I played their game back. I was sitting at my small desk in my one-bedroom apartment, the one with a view of a brick wall, trying to finish a freelance design project. My phone buzzed, showing my brother's name, James. I answered, expecting another last-minute demand for his upcoming wedding. But all I heard was muffled noise, and then his voice clear as day, not talking to me, but about me. "She'll cover the flowers, no problem," James said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Ashley's always been a pushover. She feels guilty for being the only one with a stable job." A woman's laugh, high-pitched and sharp, followed. It was his fiancée, Chloe. "Are you sure? That floral arch I want costs like $5,000? What about the cake? The 5-tier one with the imported sugar flowers?" Then, my own mother's voice joined in, the betrayal twisting like a knife in my gut. "Oh, honey, don't you worry," my mom, Nancy, said soothingly. "She'll do anything for her family. She's a good girl. She knows this wedding is important for our family's image." Their words hung in the air of my tiny apartment, mixing with the smell of burnt coffee. They weren't just asking for help. They were exploiting my love and my sense of duty. They saw me not as a daughter or a sister, but as an open wallet, a resource to be drained. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hand holding my phone was shaking so hard I thought the screen would shatter. I quickly hit the record button, capturing every last condescending syllable. The call ended a few moments later, probably as James finally realized his phone was on. Silence. The only sound was the low hum of my old refrigerator. I looked around my apartment, at the bills stacked on my counter, at the secondhand furniture I'd bought myself. I was working 60-hour weeks to build my own graphic design business from scratch, saving every penny. Meanwhile, they were planning a $100,000 wedding, a lavish affair at a country club I couldn't even afford to join, and they were laughing about how they could trick me into paying for a huge chunk of it. My dad, Arthur, was a carpenter. He believed in building things that last, strong foundations, honest work, and relationships based on respect. He always said that a person's character was like a house. Without a solid foundation of honesty, it would eventually collapse on itself. Since he passed away 5 years ago, I'd tried to be the glue holding our family together. I see now I wasn't glue. I was the wood they were burning to keep themselves warm. The shock slowly faded, replaced by a cold, hard clarity I hadn't felt in years. They thought I was a pushover, a good girl. They were about to find out how wrong they were. I saved the audio file to my cloud storage, my laptop, and a separate hard drive. I labeled it, James and Chloe's Wedding Toast. An hour later, my phone rang again. It was James. "Hey, Ash," he said, his voice sickeningly cheerful. "I was just talking with Chloe, and we had the most amazing idea for the floral arrangements. But they're a little pricey. We were wondering—" I cut him off, my voice steady and sweet. "Of course, James. Whatever you need. Just send me the invoice. It's your special day, after all." I could almost hear the triumphant smirk on his face. "You're the best, sis. I knew we could count on you." "Oh, you can count on me," I thought as I hung up. "You can count on me to give you the wedding you so richly deserve." They thought they were playing me. They had no idea I was now the one building the stage, board by board, nail by nail. The wedding was in 6 months. That gave me 6 months to ensure that when their perfect, expensive world came crashing down, the foundation would be nothing but lies, and everyone they ever wanted to impress would be there to watch. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about taking back my life, one recorded lie at a time. The next morning, an email from Chloe's Dream Florals was sitting in my inbox. I opened it, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The invoice was for $4,850 for a floral arch. I stared at the number, a figure that represented 3 months of my rent. It was obscene. It was a joke, but I knew they were deadly serious. Without a moment of hesitation, I logged into my online banking, my fingers moving with a mechanical calm I didn't feel. I transferred the full amount from my business savings account, the one I was building to finally rent a small office space. I typed a simple note in the transfer description, a gift for James and Chloe. Then I took a screenshot of the confirmation and emailed it to James, Chloe, and my mother, Nancy, with the subject line, "All taken care of. XO." The response was immediate. A group text lit up my phone. "OMG, Ashley, you are literally an angel," Chloe wrote, followed by a dozen heart emojis. "Told you she was the best," James added. My mother sent a separate, private message. "That was very generous of you, dear. Your father, Arthur, would be so proud of how you always put family first." The words were meant to be a pat on the head, a reward for my compliance. Instead, they felt like acid. My father would be horrified. He despised users and manipulators. My father always said that lies are like termites. They eat away at the foundation until the whole house comes crashing down. And right now, I could hear the chewing. A week later, my mother invited me to dinner. It was at their house, the one I grew up in, which they were constantly threatening to sell unless I helped with the mortgage. When I walked in, James and Chloe were already there, sitting on the new leather sofa I'd helped pay for last Christmas. Chloe was flipping through a thick, glossy wedding magazine, pointing at a picture of a towering 7-tier cake. "Isn't it just a dream?" she sighed dramatically, looking up at me with wide, innocent eyes. "The baker said it's a specialty. Each sugar flower is hand-painted. It's art, really." "It's beautiful, Chloe," I said, my voice perfectly even. I sat down in my dad's old armchair, the fabric worn and familiar. "It's also the price of a small car," James laughed, throwing an arm around her. "But hey, you only get married once, right?" He looked at me, a lazy, expectant smile on his face. The hook was in the water. They were waiting for me to bite. My mother came in from the kitchen, carrying a tray of appetizers. "We were just talking about the cake," she said to me, her tone light and breezy. "And the venue, James. Did you tell Ashley about the venue deposit?" James shook his head. "Oh yeah, the country club needs a $10,000 deposit to hold the date. It's due next Friday." I just nodded, taking a cracker from the tray. I didn't let my expression change. I was a statue. Inside, I was a supercomputer, logging every word, every glance, every manipulative pause. $10,000 for a place that wouldn't let me in the front door without a membership. "That's a lot of money," I said simply. Chloe's face fell, a perfectly practiced pout forming on her lips. "I know," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "It's just, with my parents helping with my dress and James's dad gone, we're just stretched so thin." It was a masterful performance. The damsel in distress, the financial orphan. She conveniently forgot that my dad's life insurance payout was what had paid off the majority of their mortgage. "Don't you worry your pretty little head," my mother said, patting Chloe's hand. She then turned her gaze to me, her eyes full of that familiar weaponized disappointment she was so good at deploying. "We'll figure something out. We always do." The unspoken words hung in the air. "You will figure something out, Ashley." I let the silence stretch for a moment, enjoying the flicker of panic in their eyes. Then I smiled, a warm, reassuring smile that didn't reach my soul. "Of course we will. Family helps family. James, just send me the venue's banking details. I'll take care of the deposit." The relief in the room was so thick I could have bottled it. James jumped up and gave me a hug. "I knew it! You're saving my life, Ash." "It's what sisters do," I said, patting his back while looking over his shoulder at Chloe, who was already beaming, her crocodile tears miraculously gone. That night I went home and opened a new spreadsheet. I created columns: date, item, amount, promised by, paid by Ashley. I filled in the first 2 lines, the floral arch and the venue deposit. The total was already close to $15,000. Next to it, I opened the audio file I had saved. I listened to it again, to their laughter, to their condescending certainty that I was their fool. Every giggle, every smug word was fuel. They were building the wedding of their dreams on a foundation of my hard work and their lies. They had no idea I was the one with the blueprints, and I was planning a demolition that would be spectacular. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect. It was about reclaiming the 28 years I had spent being their safety net. Now I was going to be the hole they fell right through. The next few weeks were a blur of invoices. A $5,000 deposit for a photographer named Captures by Celine. A $3,000 down payment for a string quartet. A $2,000 fee for a calligrapher to hand-address 200 invitations. Each request arrived with a breathless, panicked phone call from Chloe, followed by a casual, entitled text from James saying, "Thanks, Ash. You're a lifesaver." I paid every single one. My spreadsheet grew longer, a meticulous log of their greed. The total was now creeping towards $35,000. My business account, the one that held my dreams of an office with a window, was shrinking at an alarming rate. But I felt a strange sense of calm. I was investing. I was building something. One Saturday, Chloe called me, her voice an octave higher than usual. "Ashley, it's a disaster, an absolute catastrophe." I was in the middle of designing a logo for a new client, but I put my work aside, leaning back in my chair. "What's wrong, Chloe?" "The caterer," she wailed. "The one we wanted? The one who does all the celebrity weddings? He has a last-minute opening, but he needs a $20,000 retainer by Monday. Monday, Ashley, or we'll lose him and have to serve, I don't know, chicken wings." The sheer drama was almost comical. $20,000 for appetizers. I pictured my dad, Arthur, who could make a meal for 10 people with $20 and a smile. "That's a lot," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I know," she sobbed, "and with everything else, we just can't. Our dream wedding is falling apart." I heard James in the background. "Tell her it's for the family's reputation. We can't look cheap." I closed my eyes. Reputation. Their reputation, built on my bank account. "Don't worry, Chloe," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "I'll handle it. Send me the caterer's details." The sob cut off instantly. "Oh, Ashley, you're the best sister I could have ever asked for. I love you so much." "I know," I said, and hung up. I immediately transferred the money, screenshotted the confirmation, and added it to my evidence folder. I also added a new column to my spreadsheet. Justification. Next to the $20,000, I typed, "To avoid serving chicken wings." The next day, I went to my mom's house to drop off some groceries. As I walked past my dad's old workshop in the garage, a small, preserved space that was supposed to be left untouched, I noticed the door was ajar. A cold feeling washed over me. I pushed it open. The room smelled faintly of sawdust and old memories. But something was wrong. The wall where my dad's favorite hand plane and chisel set used to hang was empty. They were antique, beautiful tools he'd inherited from his own father, their wooden handles worn smooth by generations of hard work. They were the one thing I had asked to keep, but my mother insisted they stay in the house. As a memory. Panic seized me. I ran inside, calling for my mom, Nancy. She was in the living room, watching TV with Chloe. "Mom, Dad's tools are gone, the antique set." My mother barely looked up from her show. "Oh, that." Chloe needed something rustic for the wedding decor, for the gift table, you know? Authentic charm. I turned to look at Chloe, who was scrolling through her phone, a smug little smile on her face. She didn't even have the decency to look guilty. "You took them?" My voice was a whisper. "Without asking me?" She finally looked up, her eyes wide with fake innocence. "I was going to tell you. They just look so perfect. I'm going to tie little ribbons around them. It's for the aesthetic." The aesthetic. She was going to tie ribbons on my grandfather's legacy. I looked at my mother, pleading, "Mom, those were his most prized possessions." Nancy sighed, annoyed at the interruption. "Ashley, don't be so dramatic. It's for your brother's wedding. They're just old pieces of wood. Your father would want you to be supportive." I felt the floor drop out from under me. That was the moment I understood. They weren't just greedy, they were vandals. They would take and take and take until there was nothing left of me, or of my father's memory. I turned and walked out of the house without another word. As I sat in my car, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, I remembered something my father always said. Lies are like termites, he'd tell me. They eat away at the foundation until the whole house comes crashing down. Their house was built on a nest of them, and I was about to light the match. That night, I found Chloe's wedding blog, and there they were. A photo of my father's tools, artfully arranged on a burlap cloth, with the caption, "Finding the most darling vintage props for our big day. And rustic wedding nurtured details Dutchers blessed." I saved the screenshot. Another exhibit for the prosecution. The price of this item wasn't in dollars. It was in my soul. And the invoice for that, I decided, was going to be astronomical. 2 months before the wedding, the total in my spreadsheet hit $63,000. I had liquidated some stocks I'd inherited from my grandmother and paused my own retirement contributions. I was eating ramen noodles for dinner so that Chloe could have hand-engraved napkin rings. The absurdity wasn't lost on me. It was fuel. One evening, James called, his voice tight with manufactured stress. "Ash, we have a problem. A big one." I swirled the last of the noodles in my bowl. "What is it, James?" "The honeymoon," he said. "The travel agent just called. The all-inclusive overwater bungalow in Bora Bora that Chloe wants, the price went up. We need an extra $15,000 to book it or we lose it. $15,000 for a tan." I took a slow breath, picturing the audio file saved in 3 separate locations. "That's a tough one, James." "Tough?" he scoffed. "It's a nightmare. Chloe is in tears. This is supposed to be the most magical time of our lives, and it's all just stress." This was my opening. The one I had been waiting for. "You know," I began, my voice dripping with sympathy. "It sounds like you two are overwhelmed. You're trying to manage so many vendors and details. Maybe you need a professional." There was a pause. "What, like a wedding planner?" "Ash, we can't afford that. We can barely afford the wedding." The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. "Let me look into it," I said sweetly. "As a gift. My wedding gift to you both. Someone to take all this stress off your shoulders so you can just enjoy being engaged." I could hear Chloe gasp in the background. "Would you really do that, Ashley?" "Of course," I said. "You're my family. I want this to be perfect for you." The next day, I didn't look for the most popular or the most recommended wedding planner. I looked for the most ruthless. I found him through a series of discreet inquiries in the high-end event industry. His name was Gregory. He was known for 2 things: creating jaw-droppingly extravagant events and for having absolutely zero tolerance for clients who couldn't pay their bills. His consultation fee alone was $5,000. I paid it without blinking. We met in a sleek, minimalist office that overlooked the city. Gregory was a tall man in a perfectly tailored suit, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through me. I didn't waste time with small talk. I laid it all out: the butt dial, the financial exploitation, the spreadsheet, the stolen tools. I even played him a 30-second clip of the recording. He listened intently, a small, unreadable smile playing on his lips. When I finished, he leaned back in his leather chair. "So, you're not hiring me to plan a wedding," he said, his voice a low purr. "You're hiring me to produce a tragedy." "I'm hiring you to give them exactly what they want," I corrected him. "A wedding so spectacular, so over the top that the fall will be breathtaking. I want you to encourage every expensive whim, every ridiculous upgrade. I will pay your invoices, but all the vendor contracts will be in their names, James and Chloe." Gregory's smile widened. "I see. You're providing the rope, and I'm teaching them how to tie the noose. I find this creatively stimulating. I'll take the job." I transferred his $10,000 retainer on the spot. That weekend, I introduced him to James and Chloe at a fancy brunch, which I paid for. They were immediately smitten. Gregory was charming, flattering, and spoke their language of luxury and status. "A string quartet?" he said, waving a dismissive hand when they told him their plans. "Darling, no. For a wedding of this caliber, we need a 12-piece orchestra, and for the cocktail hour, a live jazz trio." Chloe's eyes went wide with delight. "Can we do that?" With my connections, Gregory said smoothly, you can do anything. He then turned to the honeymoon. Bora Bora is lovely, but it's been done. Have you considered a private yacht tour of the Greek Isles for 2 weeks? Much more exclusive. James looked at me, a flicker of concern in his eyes about the cost. I just gave him a serene, encouraging smile. Whatever Gregory thinks is best, I said. We have to trust the expert. They melted under his influence. Within an hour, they had agreed to the orchestra, the jazz trio, and were seriously considering the yacht. As I sat there, watching them get swept up in a fantasy I was bankrolling, I thought of my dad, Arthur. I remembered him in his workshop, carefully measuring a piece of wood and telling me, lies are like termites. They eat away at the foundation until the whole house comes crashing down. My family had built their entire world on the lie that I was their endless resource. Gregory was now a contractor, and his job was to accelerate the infestation. Every new, absurdly expensive idea he proposed was another termite, chewing away at their false foundation. They were so busy admiring the beautiful facade of their dream wedding, they couldn't hear the sound of the structure groaning, getting ready to collapse. And I had the best seat in the house. The following month, Gregory worked like a master artist, painting a masterpiece of financial ruin. I received daily updates from him, concise and professional emails detailing the new expenses James and Chloe had approved. They were dizzying. A $10,000 custom-built monogrammed ice luge for cocktails, a $15,000 fireworks display synchronized to their favorite pop song, a $7,000 cigar and whiskey tasting bar for the male guests. My total investment in their downfall soared past $80,000. Gregory arranged a meeting with them at the venue to finalize the lighting design. I asked him to record the audio on his phone, for my records. He agreed with a glint in his eye. Later that evening, he sent me the file. A simple spotlight on the cake? Gregory's voice was incredulous. Chloe, a bride like you deserves a theatrical entrance. I'm thinking a full Broadway-level lighting rig, with atmospheric smoke. When you walk down that aisle, you shouldn't just be seen, you should be revealed. Oh my God, Chloe breathed. I love that. Revealed. It's an additional $12,000, Gregory stated calmly. I could hear James hesitate. Wow, that's a lot for some lights, isn't it? Is it? Gregory purred. Or is it the price of an unforgettable memory? The price of every guest gasping when they see your bride for the first time? This isn't about lights, James. It's about status. It's about showing everyone you've arrived. The silence lasted for 5 seconds. Then James cleared his throat. Okay, do it. We'll do the lights. Excellent choice, Gregory said. Now, I have the final vendor contracts here for you to sign. It's just a formality, locking in these incredible artists for your day. I pictured them scribbling their signatures, their hands giddy with the thrill of spending my money, not reading a single clause of the legally binding documents that tied their names, and their names alone, to every single dollar. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a pawn shop. The gold locket my dad, Arthur, had given me for my 16th birthday felt heavy in my palm. It was the last piece of real jewelry I owned. I'd sold my car the week before to cover the deposit for their 5-star honeymoon yacht in Greece. I was now taking the bus to meet my clients. Opening the locket, I looked at the tiny faded pictures inside. One of me as a teenager and one of my dad, smiling, his eyes kind. I had to sell it to make my rent payment. The irony was bitter. I was liquidating my past to fund their fake future. I closed the locket, took a deep breath, and walked inside. I got $200 for it. I added the amount to a new private spreadsheet titled Personal Cost. That evening, my mother, Nancy, called. Her voice was syrupy sweet. Ashley, darling, I was just in that little boutique downtown, La Femme, and I saw the most divine dress. It would be absolutely perfect for the wedding. Mother of the groom, you know. It's so important to look the part. I knew the boutique. A single dress there cost more than my monthly income. Oh, really? What color is it? I asked, my voice a perfect imitation of cheerful interest. It's a beautiful champagne color, with hand-sewn pearls on the bodice. The problem is, it's a designer piece and they won't hold it. It's $4,000. She let the number hang in the air, a perfectly crafted guilt bomb. Mom, that's incredibly expensive for a dress you'll wear once? Her tone instantly turned cold and wounded. Once? Ashley, this is your brother's wedding. The photos will last forever. Do you want your mother looking shabby in the family portraits? After all I've done for you children? Your father would be so disappointed to hear you being so selfish. There it was again. The ghost of my father, weaponized against me. I felt a familiar surge of anger, but I pushed it down, replacing it with the cold, hard resolve that had become my closest companion. You're right, Mom. I'm sorry, I said, the false apology tasting like ash in my mouth. You deserve to look beautiful. Put it on your credit card and I'll transfer you the money tonight. The switch back to her cheerful tone was instantaneous. Oh, thank you, sweetie. I knew you'd understand. You're such a good daughter. I hung up the phone and opened my laptop. I transferred the $4,000, labeling it Mother's Dress in my spreadsheet. The grand total was now well over $130,000. My savings were gone. My business account was a ghost of its former self. I was living on fumes and fury. I looked at the screen, at the neat columns and the astronomical numbers. My father's voice echoed in my mind, clearer than ever. Lies are like termites, he'd said. They eat away at the foundation until the whole house comes crashing down. They all believed their foundation was me, solid and unbreakable. They didn't realize they were the termites, and they had chewed through the last supporting beam. The entire structure was hollowed out, ready to collapse at the slightest touch. And I was standing just out of reach, holding the demolition plunger, just waiting for the perfect moment to press the button. The wedding was just 4 weeks away. The final 3 weeks before the wedding were a whirlwind of orchestrated chaos. Gregory was a maestro, and my brother and his fiancée were his prized instruments, playing a symphony of self-destruction. The total in my spreadsheet, which I now updated with a kind of grim satisfaction every night, had reached $150,000. I had sold my car and was now taking the bus, a humbling experience that kept my anger sharp and focused. The next crisis arrived, as they always did, via a frantic phone call from Chloe. Ashley, it's the dress, she wailed, her voice cracking with manufactured despair. My dress is ruined. I was at a laundromat, watching my clothes tumble in a machine because the one in my new, cheaper apartment building was broken. What's wrong with it, Chloe? It's not ruined, she corrected herself. It's just basic. I saw a picture of another bride on Instagram. Her dress was by that famous designer, Elijah Vance. My dress just looks so off the rack next to it. My whole day will be a joke. I closed my eyes, the smell of cheap detergent filling the air. I thought you loved your dress. I did, but now I hate it. And Gregory found out that Elijah Vance has a cancellation. He can make a custom gown for me, but it's $30,000, Ash. And we have to pay in full by Friday. $30,000. That was more than I made in 6 months. It was a down payment on a house. It was a fantasy. Chloe, that's an insane amount of money for a dress, I said, my voice flat. Is it? I heard James's voice in the background, followed by Gregory's smooth tones. Gregory must have been with them, stoking the fire. It's not a dress, Ashley, James cut in, his voice full of the confidence Gregory had instilled in him. It's the centerpiece. It's the statement. Gregory says it will elevate the entire event from a wedding to a society affair. I stayed silent, letting the absurdity of his words hang between us. A society affair paid for by a graphic designer living on instant noodles and taking the bus. Please, Ash, Chloe begged, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. It's the last big thing. I promise. After this, we're done. It was a lie, we both knew it, but it was the lie she needed to tell herself. Fine, I said, the word feeling like a stone in my throat. I'll handle it. The next day, they insisted I come with them to the designer's exclusive showroom for the fitting. Walking into the opulent space felt like entering another world. It was all white marble, champagne, and hushed reverence. Gregory was there, looking impeccable in a charcoal suit. He greeted me with a nod that was almost imperceptible, a silent acknowledgement of our conspiracy. Chloe disappeared into a fitting room and emerged a few minutes later in a cloud of silk and hand-stitched pearls. The dress was undeniably stunning. It was also a monument to excess. She twirled in front of the three-way mirror, her eyes glazed over with adoration for her own reflection. She didn't look at me. She didn't thank me. "It's perfect," she breathed. James looked like he'd won the lottery, puffing his chest out. "Now that's a dress worthy of my bride." As I stood there, feeling invisible, Chloe finally turned to me. She held up a thick catalog. "Oh, I almost forgot. Your bridesmaid dress." She flipped to a page and pointed at a monstrosity. It was a shapeless gown in a color best described as sickly mustard. "This one," she said decisively. "The color will make the pearls on my dress really pop in the photos. It's only $500. You can just order it online." She smiled, a bright, empty smile that didn't reach her eyes. She expected me to pay $500 to look ridiculous in her fake society affair, after I had just spent $30,000 on her dress. The audacity was breathtaking. I looked from her smiling face to the ugly dress in the catalog. I felt nothing. The anger had burned away into something colder, harder. A certainty. "Of course, Chloe," I said, my voice serene. "Whatever you want." That night, I sat in my small apartment, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating the bare walls. I transferred the $30,000 to the designer's account. I took a screenshot and filed it away. Then, I opened a new browser tab and ordered the $500 mustard dress, using the last of the money on my credit card. I added both amounts to my spreadsheets. The grand total of their wedding was now $180,500. The personal cost column was just as painful. My phone rang. It was Gregory. "The final payment has been confirmed," he said, his voice crisp. "All vendors are locked in. Every contract, from the orchestra to the monogrammed ice luge, is legally binding and bears the signatures of James and Chloe." "Good," I said. There was a pause. I could hear the faint clinking of ice in a glass on his end. "The total expenditure is quite remarkable. They've signed contracts totaling just over $210,000. The cancellation clauses are, shall we say, punitive. Non-refundable deposits alone exceed $100,000. I stared at the number I had just typed. It was even more than I thought. "The stage is set, Ms. Evans," Gregory continued, his voice dropping to a low, theatrical purr. "The actors are in place. The tragedy has been written. You just need to tell me when to raise the curtain." I looked around my empty apartment, at the boxes I hadn't bothered to unpack. I thought of my father's stolen tools, my grandmother's stocks, my sold locket. I thought of a hideous mustard-colored dress. "The rehearsal dinner," I said, my voice steady. "The night before the wedding. That's when the curtain goes up." The week of the wedding felt like the final, deceptive calm before a hurricane. The sky was bright, but I could feel the pressure dropping. The air was thick with anticipation. I spent my days at my graphic design job, creating clean, minimalist logos for tech startups, a world away from the gaudy, over-the-top spectacle I was financing. At night, I'd come home to my sterile apartment, eat something cheap from a can, and review the final details with Gregory. He was my general, and I was his silent commander, planning the final offensive from a remote bunker. 3 days before the wedding, my mother, Nancy, called. Her voice was breathless with a new, last-minute emergency. "Ashley, we have a disaster on our hands," she announced, her tone suggesting a national crisis. I was sitting on the floor, sorting my laundry into whites and colors. "What is it now, Mom?" "The party favors. Chloe just realized we don't have anything for the rehearsal dinner guests. Gregory found these adorable miniature bottles of champagne from France with custom labels. It's perfect. But the vendor needs a rush fee. It's $2,000. $2,000 for tiny bottles of champagne that most people would forget on the table. It was perfect. It was the most them thing I could imagine. "Mom, the rehearsal dinner is in 2 days. Isn't it a little late?" I asked, playing my part. "That's why it's a disaster," she said, exasperated. "We can't have guests leaving empty-handed. What would people think? Your father, Arthur, always said that hospitality was everything." The casual way she invoked his name, twisting his genuine kindness into a justification for her shallow materialism, made my stomach clench. My father's idea of hospitality was a warm meal and an open door, not a $2,000 party favor. "You're right," I said, my voice hollow. "We can't have that. Tell Gregory to order them. I'll cover it." "Oh, thank you, sweetie," she chirped, the crisis immediately averted. "I knew I could count on you. You're saving the day." I hung up and transferred the money. It was the last of my emergency cash fund. I added the line item to my spreadsheet: rehearsal dinner favors. The total now stood at a staggering $182,500. My bank account balance was now under $50. I looked at the number, not with panic, but with a strange sense of peace. It was done. I had nothing left to give, and so they had nothing left to take. They saw me as a pushover, a human safety net for their image. What would you do if your own family treated you like an ATM? Comment your thoughts and share this story. The next day, a large box arrived at my apartment. It was the mustard-colored bridesmaid dress. I slit the packing tape with my keys and pulled it out. The fabric was a cheap, shiny polyester, and the color was even more nauseating in person. It was the color of sickness. I held it up against myself, looking at my reflection in the dark screen of my television. I looked pale and washed out. I was a prop, designed to make the bride shine brighter. And they had paid for this prop with my life savings. I thought about setting it on fire. I thought about cutting it into 1,000,000 pieces. But I didn't. Instead, I hung it carefully in my closet. This dress wasn't an insult. It was a uniform. It was the costume I would wear for the final act of this tragedy. And when I wore it, no one would be looking at me anyway. They would be looking at the beautiful bride and the handsome groom, the stars of the show, right before the entire set collapsed around them. The morning of the rehearsal dinner, I woke up before dawn. The city was quiet. I made myself a cup of instant coffee and sat by the window, watching the sky slowly lighten from black to a bruised purple. Today was the day. After months of planning, of sacrificing, of swallowing my rage, it was finally here. I felt strangely calm. My father, Arthur, used to have a saying for moments like this, a different one from his usual warnings about lies. He'd say, "The calmest water is just above the waterfall." I spent the day working, a strange sense of detachment settling over me. I delivered my projects, answered my emails, and participated in a Zoom call about quarterly goals. It all felt like a movie about someone else's life. At 5 p.m., I logged off and started to get ready. I took a long shower, letting the hot water run over my shoulders. I did my makeup carefully, not to look beautiful, but to look composed. A mask of serene indifference. Then, I put on the dress. It felt as awful as it looked, the cheap fabric scratching against my skin. I slipped on a pair of simple heels and picked up the small clutch I'd borrowed from a friend. Inside was my phone, fully charged, and a single key. That was all I needed. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Gregory. "The venue is spectacular. The champagne tower is being assembled. The guests are arriving. All actors are in position. Are you ready for your entrance?" I took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was a stranger. She was tired and thin, but her eyes held a glint of steel I hadn't seen before. She was a survivor, and tonight, she was a demolition expert. I typed back my reply. "On my way, raise the curtain." I walked out of my apartment, locking the door behind me. I didn't look back. There was nothing there for me anymore. Everything I cared about was either gone, or it was about to be avenged. As I walked down the street to the bus stop, the city lights were just beginning to flicker on, like stage lights being warmed up for a grand performance, and I knew with absolute certainty that this would be a show no one would ever forget. The bus pulled away from the curb, leaving me in a cloud of diesel fumes just a block from the Grand Regency Hotel. The name itself was a joke. There was nothing grand about the life I was living to pay for their party inside. I walked the rest of the way, my cheap heels clicking on the pavement. The contrast was dizzying. Outside, the city was loud and dirty. Inside the hotel lobby, it was a different universe of polished marble, hushed voices, and the faint scent of lilies. I gave my name to the hostess at the entrance to the ballroom, and she looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my mustard dress with a flicker of pity, before she forced a professional smile. "Right this way, Miss Evans." Walking into that room felt like stepping into the physical manifestation of my spreadsheet. A string quartet was playing softly in the corner. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved silently through the crowd, with trays of champagne and elaborate appetizers. In the center of the room, a 5-foot-tall ice sculpture of 2 swans with their necks entwined was slowly melting under the soft lights. Everything was champagne-colored and gold, a perfect match for my mother's $4,000 dress. I saw them holding court near the sculpture. My mother, Nancy, laughing a little too loudly. Chloe, looking radiant in a white silk jumpsuit, and James, my brother, standing beside her with a possessive hand on her waist, his chest puffed out. They were the sun, and the 50 or so guests were planets orbiting them. My mother spotted me first. She glided over, her smile as bright and brittle as spun sugar. "Ashley, darling, you made it." I was starting to worry. She scanned my dress again. "That color is certainly bold. But the important thing is that you're here." She didn't ask how I got there. She didn't care. "It's quite a party, Mom," I said, my voice even. "Isn't it?" She beamed. "Gregory has outdone himself. Every detail is perfect. Your father would have been so proud of James." Across the room, I saw him. Gregory. He was standing near a large blank wall, talking to a technician who was making adjustments to a hidden projector. He met my eyes for a fraction of a second, a silent signal passing between us. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Everything was in place. The trap was set. I took a glass of water from a passing waiter and stood in a corner, watching them. Watching James tell a story that made everyone laugh. Watching Chloe touch her hair and preen under the attention. Watching my mother refill her champagne glass for the 4th time. They were so happy, so completely absorbed in their perfect moment. A moment built on a foundation of my life's work. I thought of what my father, Arthur, always said. Lies are like termites. They were all celebrating in a beautiful house, not realizing the foundation had been eaten away to dust. After about an hour, Chloe's father, a portly man with a red face, tapped his glass with a spoon. The room quieted. He launched into a gushing, sentimental speech about his little girl and the wonderful man she was marrying. He talked about their bright future, their ambition, their perfect match. I listened to the lies one after another, feeling nothing but a cold, clear sense of purpose. When he finished, to a round of polite applause, James took the microphone from him. He beamed at the crowd, his teeth white against his tan skin. "Thank you, everyone, for being here. It means the world to us." He looked over at Chloe with a gooey expression of adoration. Then his eyes found me, standing alone in the corner in my hideous dress. "And I'd like to make one very special toast," he said, his voice booming through the speakers. "To my sister, Ashley." A spotlight suddenly hit me, and I felt 100 pairs of eyes turn in my direction. I didn't flinch. "Ash, we couldn't have done any of this without you. Your support, your belief in us, and your incredible generosity has made our dream a reality." He smiled, a wide, magnanimous smile. "Come on up here, Ash," he said, gesturing to the small stage. "Let everyone thank you properly." The crowd began to applaud. It was a slow, polite clap that grew louder as I started walking toward the stage. They were clapping for the good sister, the generous benefactor, the family martyr. They had no idea they were applauding the executioner. I walked through the tables, the cheap polyester of my dress rustling with every step. I saw Gregory give the technician one last nod. I reached the stage and took the microphone from my brother's hand. He gave my shoulder a patronizing squeeze. I looked out at the sea of smiling, expectant faces. I looked at my mother, dabbing a tear from her eye. I looked at Chloe, who was blowing me a kiss. "Thank you, James," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the silent room. "You're right. You couldn't have done this without me. And I think it's time everyone here knew exactly what your dream cost." Behind me, the projector on the blank wall flickered to life. The first sound that came from the speakers wasn't a voice. It was the muffled, indistinct sound of a phone in a pocket, the scrape of fabric. A few guests looked confused, glancing at the sound technician's booth where Gregory was standing, his face a perfect mask of neutrality. James's smile faltered for a second. He leaned toward me, whispering, "What is this? Some kind of baby photo slideshow?" I didn't answer him. I just kept my eyes on the crowd. Then, his own voice, sharp and clear, sliced through the elegant ballroom. "She'll cover the flowers, no problem," James's recorded voice said, dripping with the same arrogance I remembered from that afternoon in my apartment. The sound quality was perfect. Gregory had cleaned it up beautifully. Ashley's always been a pushover. She feels guilty for being the only one with a stable job. A collective gasp rippled through the room. It was soft at first, like a breeze, but it was undeniable. I saw James's face. The confident, charming groom mask melted away, replaced by a slack-jawed horror. His tan seemed to turn a sickly shade of gray under the warm reception lights. He looked from the speakers to me, his eyes wide with disbelief and dawning rage. Then came Chloe's laugh. It was a high, tinkling sound on the recording, but in the silent room it sounded like shattering glass. "A guilty pushover with a checkbook, my favorite kind," her recorded voice chirped. "Did you tell her the caterer's final bill went up by $5,000? "I'll tell her it went up by 10, James's voice replied, followed by a low chuckle. "She won't even check. She'll just pay it. She always does." I turned my head slowly to look at Chloe. Her perfectly made-up face was a mess of confusion and panic. Her hand flew to her throat, clutching the diamond necklace I had paid for. Her eyes darted around the room, seeing the shocked and judgmental faces of her friends, her family. Her father, who had just given that gushing speech, was staring at her, his red face now a deep, furious purple. The recording continued. My mother's voice joined in, smooth and condescending. "It's for the best, James. She doesn't have a family of her own to spend it on. What else is she going to do with her money? At least this way, it's keeping the family name looking good. It's her contribution." My mother's smile was frozen on her face, a grotesque rictus of social grace. She looked like a mannequin that had just been told it was on fire. Her champagne glass tilted in her hand, spilling the bubbling liquid onto the white tablecloth, but she didn't seem to notice. I watched them all, the three of them, trapped on their little stage of lies. My father's words echoed in my mind. Lies are like termites. For years, they had been chewing away at the foundations of our family, hollowing it out from the inside while keeping the exterior perfectly painted. Now, with one push, the whole structure was collapsing into dust, and everyone was here to witness it. Gregory let the recording play for another 30 seconds. There was more. Chloe making fun of the dress she knew I would wear. James joking about how he'd get me to fund their honeymoon to the Maldives. My mother suggesting they ask me for the down payment on a house as a wedding gift. Each word was a nail in their coffin. The guests were no longer trying to hide their reactions. Whispers turned into audible murmurs. People were pulling out their phones, not to take pictures of the happy couple, but to record their public humiliation. I saw a few of James's business associates shaking their heads, their expressions a mixture of disgust and pity. I saw Chloe's bridesmaids huddled together, their faces pale. They weren't looking at Chloe with sympathy. They were looking at her as if she were a stranger. Finally, the recording ended. The last sound was James saying, "She'll never know. She's too busy working to have a real life." Then silence. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the grand ballroom. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. The spotlight was still on me, but I felt invisible. All eyes were on James, Chloe, and my mother, 3 statues in a museum of their own making. James finally broke the paralysis. He lunged for the microphone in my hand, his face twisted in a snarl. "You!" he began, his voice a raw whisper. I pulled the microphone back just out of his reach. I leaned into it, my lips almost touching the cool metal. I looked out at the silent, watching crowd, then at my brother, whose dream had just turned into a nightmare. "A toast," I said, my voice calm and clear, echoing in the dead silence. "To the happy couple. May you get everything you so richly deserve." I placed the microphone carefully on the stage floor, creating a soft thud. Then, I turned and walked away. I didn't run. I walked slowly, deliberately, down the steps and through the aisle that parted for me like the Red Sea. No one tried to stop me. No one said a word. The cheap polyester dress didn't rustle anymore. It felt like armor. I didn't look back once. I just walked toward the exit, leaving them to drown in the truth. The cool night air felt like a splash of water on a burn. I expected my hands to be shaking, my heart to be hammering against my ribs, but there was only a profound and unsettling calm. Each step I took on the polished marble floor of the hotel lobby was steady. The doorman, a kind-faced man who had greeted me with a polite nod on my way in, now stared at me with wide eyes, holding the heavy glass door open as if I were royalty leaving a ball. Maybe I was. I had just dropped a bomb and walked away from the explosion without looking back. I didn't have a car, of course. I'd taken a taxi to the wedding, a detail James had mocked in the recording, saying I couldn't even afford a decent ride. Now, standing on the curb under the warm glow of the hotel's awning, I was grateful for it. I didn't want to be trapped in a metal box with my own thoughts. I wanted to walk. I started down the sidewalk, the city lights blurring around me. My phone, silent until now, began to vibrate in my clutch. Then it vibrated again. And again. A relentless, frantic buzzing. I pulled it out. The screen was a cascade of notifications, dozens of text messages from numbers I didn't recognize, missed calls from James, from Chloe, from my mother, Nancy. I swiped them all away without reading. I opened a social media app instead. The wedding hashtag James and Chloe had been so proud of was trending. But the posts weren't the glossy, curated photos they had envisioned. They were shaky phone videos of the exact moment the recording started playing. I saw my own face on the giant screen, calm and determined. I saw James's face contort from smug satisfaction to disbelief, then to pure rage. I saw Chloe's perfectly made-up face crumble, her mascara starting to run. And I saw my mother, Nancy, frozen in her chair, the champagne spilling from her glass in a slow, golden arc. The comments were a torrent of shock, disgust, and surprisingly support for me. People were calling my family out, dissecting every cruel word from the recording. Strangers were defending me, calling me brave. I kept walking, the phone in my hand a window into the world I had just shattered. A new message popped up, this one from a name I recognized, an aunt of Chloe's, a woman who had always looked at James with a polite but distinct coolness. The message was short. I always knew there was something wrong with that family. You did the right thing. If you need anything, let me know. Some of us are on your side. It was the first crack in their united front, the first sign that Chloe wouldn't be surrounded by unquestioning sympathy. My phone buzzed with another call from Nancy. This time, I let it go to voicemail. A few seconds later, the notification appeared. Morbid curiosity got the better of me. I put the phone to my ear. Her voice was no longer smooth and condescending. It was a ragged, hysterical shriek. Ashley, what have you done? You've ruined everything, everything. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family, to your brother? This was the most important day of his life. You selfish, ungrateful girl, after everything we've done for you. Her voice broke into a sob, but it wasn't a sob of grief. It was a sob of pure, undiluted fury. You will regret this, you hear me? You will be all alone and you will have no one to blame but yourself. I deleted the voicemail. Her words had no power anymore. They were just noise. For years, the threat of being all alone was the cage she used to keep me in line. But I realized, walking under the streetlights, that I had been alone for a very long time, even when I was in a room full of my family. This wasn't a punishment. It was a release. I finally stopped at a small 24-hour diner, the kind with vinyl booths and fluorescent lights that were too bright. I slid into a booth by the window and ordered a cup of black coffee. I felt the cheap polyester of my dress against the sticky vinyl. It wasn't armor anymore. It was just a dress I had worn to my own liberation party. As the waitress set the hot coffee in front of me, my phone rang again. It was an unknown number, but it wasn't local. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. I said nothing, just listened. Am I speaking with Ashley? A man's voice asked. It was deep, calm, and professional. Who is this? I asked, my voice steady. My name is Mr. Norman. I'm an attorney representing a consortium of investors in your brother's latest business venture. I was a guest at the wedding this evening. I believe you and I have something to discuss. It seems my clients may have been misled about the character and financial stability of their new partner. I stared out the diner window at my own reflection. The tired-looking woman in the cheap dress didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like someone who had just found a new, much more interesting game to play. The social humiliation was just the beginning. The real damage, the kind my father Arthur always warned about, was the collapse of the structure itself. And someone was handing me a sledgehammer. "I'm listening," I said. I held the phone to my ear, the warmth of the diner's coffee cup a small anchor in the storm that had become my life. The clatter of plates and the low hum of conversation around me felt like they were from a different world. "I'm listening," I said again, my voice colder than I expected. "Good, Mr. I," Norman's voice replied, smooth and unhurried. "My associates and I have invested a considerable sum, $2 million to be precise, into your brother's new venture, Evans Lifestyle. He presented himself as a savvy entrepreneur from a family with a strong financial foundation." I almost laughed. Our family's foundation was about as strong as a house of cards in a hurricane. "And what did he use as proof of this foundation?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. "Among other things, he used your design firm," Mr. Norman said. "He presented documents suggesting your business was a subsidiary of his, a proof of concept demonstrating the family's profitability. He listed your annual revenues as part of his company's assets and implied you were a silent partner who would guarantee the initial investment." The coffee cup suddenly felt cold in my hands. It wasn't just that he used me for flower money. He had used my entire professional life, the one thing I had built for myself away from them, as a prop in his con. He had tied my name to a $2 million lie. "I am not his partner," I said, each word sharp and clear. "My business has nothing to do with him." "We gathered as much from your presentation this evening," he said, a hint of dry amusement in his tone. "Character is a key metric for my investors, Miss Evans. Your brother's character has been found wanting. The problem is that proving financial misrepresentation can be a lengthy and expensive process. He's very good at covering his tracks with legal paperwork." I stared at my reflection in the dark window. The cheap dress, the tired eyes. But there was something else there now, a glint of steel. My father, Arthur, had been a quiet man, but he always taught me to look at the architecture of things, be it a building or a person's life. "A structure built on lies," he used to say, "will always have a flaw in the foundation. You just have to know where to press." "What do you need?" I asked Mr. Norman. "We need something concrete. The original, unedited business proposal he drafted, the one before his own lawyers sanitized it. Something that shows his intent to defraud from the outset. We suspect his personal projections and notes would be illuminating." My mind flashed back to my childhood home, the house my mother, Nancy, couldn't wait to sell after my father passed, but couldn't because of the market. I was the one who kept the keys, who checked on the pipes in winter, who paid the utilities from a joint account he'd left. And I knew exactly where James kept his secrets. "My father had a safe in his study," I said slowly, the plan forming in my mind. "A big old thing. James was always fascinated by it. After Dad got sick, he claimed it. Said he needed a place to keep his important documents safe. My mother let him do whatever he wanted, as always." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in Mr. Norman's head. "And do you have access to this house, Miss Evans?" "I'm the only one who does," I said. "I have the keys. And I know the combination to the safe. My father gave it to me. It's my birthday." The irony was so bitter it tasted like acid. James, in his arrogance, had hidden the evidence of his crimes in a safe he could only access because of my father, using a code that was all about me. He had locked his downfall in a box and handed me the key. "This is a significant development," Mr. Norman said, his professional calm finally showing a crack of excitement. "If you could retrieve those documents, it would be the linchpin of our case. It would move from a civil dispute to criminal fraud." I thought of James's smug face, of Chloe's fake tears, of my mother's shrieking voicemail. I thought of 28 years of being their safety net, their fixer, their endless bank account of forgiveness and support. The net was broken. The bank was closed. "He won't be at the house," I said, thinking out loud. "He and Chloe are supposed to be on a flight to Bali in the morning for their honeymoon. My mother is probably with her friends, drinking champagne and complaining about me." "The timing is opportune," Mr. Norman agreed. I took a deep breath. The diner suddenly felt too small, too bright. I was no longer the girl in the cheap dress hiding from her family. I was a woman with a key, a combination, and a purpose. The social humiliation at the wedding was a firecracker. This was a demolition charge placed right at the flawed foundation my father always talked about. "Where are you, Mr. Norman?" I asked. "As it happens, I'm in a town car 2 blocks away from your location. I thought a face-to-face meeting might be in order." I stood up, leaving a $10 bill on the table for the coffee. I walked out of the diner and into the cool night air. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, the back window gliding down to reveal a man in a sharp suit with graying temples and intelligent eyes. He looked like he was carved from granite and courtroom precedent. I got into the car. The leather was cool and smelled of money and power. It was James's world, but he was only visiting. I was about to burn it down. "Tell me the plan," I said to Mr. Norman, "and then take me to my parents' house." The ride to my parents' house was silent, but my mind was screaming. Mr. Norman drove with an unnerving calm, the city lights sliding over the car's polished hood. I watched the familiar streets of my childhood pass by, but they looked like a set from a movie I was no longer in. This was the last time I would ever drive this route as the old Ashley, the fixer, the safety net. When I left this house tonight, I would just be me. We pulled into the long driveway. The house was dark except for a single porch light, a lonely beacon in the manicured darkness. It looked smaller than I remembered, less like a fortress and more like a museum of my own sacrifices. "Are you ready, Ashley?" Mr. Norman asked, his voice gentle but firm. I nodded, my heart pounding a steady, determined rhythm against my ribs. I was born ready for this. I just hadn't known it until now. I used my key, the cold metal a familiar weight in my hand. The lock clicked and the sound echoed in the cavernous, silent foyer. The air inside was still and smelled of my mother's expensive potpourri, and something else, something stale. The smell of secrets. We walked directly to my father's study. Nothing had changed. The same leather-bound books he never read lined the shelves. The same heavy oak desk dominated the room. Behind a bland painting of a ship at sea was the safe. My hands were surprisingly steady as I spun the dial. Right to my birth month, left to the day, right to the year. A soft thud and the heavy door swung open. And there it was. A stack of manila folders sitting on top of my father's old coin collection. James hadn't even bothered to hide them well. Arrogance was his fatal flaw. I pulled them out and handed them to Mr. Norman. He opened the first folder under the dim light of the desk lamp. His face, usually a mask of professional control, tightened. "My God," he whispered, flipping through pages. "He forged your father's signature on everything. Power of attorney, wire transfers to offshore accounts. It's all here. He's been systematically draining the estate for years." He looked at me, his eyes sharp. "With this, we have him. Completely." He pulled out his phone. "I have a contact at the Port Authority police at the airport. What was their flight number?" I remembered it from the wedding invitation Chloe had shoved in my face. "Flight 712 to Bali. It departs at 7 a.m. Mr. Norman relayed the information in a low, precise voice. "Yes, James and Chloe Evans, first class. They should be in the International Lounge right now. I'm sending you the warrant application. You'll find probable cause is abundant." He hung up. They won't be leaving the country tonight. 2 hours later, we were standing on the mezzanine level of the international terminal, looking down at the exclusive first-class lounge. Through the glass walls, I could see them. James and Chloe were laughing, clinking champagne glasses. Chloe was taking a selfie, her lips in that perfect pout. They looked like a golden couple, untouchable, celebrating their victory. My stomach turned, but it wasn't from nerves anymore. It was from a cold, clear sense of justice. Then I saw them. Two uniformed officers and a man in a dark suit walked calmly into the lounge. They approached the table. I watched James's smile falter, replaced by confusion, then annoyance. He waved a dismissive hand, as if shooing away a fly. The man in the suit said something, his expression unreadable from this distance. James's face went white. All the color, all the arrogance, drained away in an instant. Chloe's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. She started wailing, a theatrical, ugly sound that cut through the quiet hum of the lounge. James stood up so quickly his chair fell over. He looked around wildly, his eyes scanning the crowd, and then he saw me. He saw me standing there, watching. His face crumpled, a mask of disbelief and pure, unadulterated panic. They were escorted out, walking past the stunned faces of the other wealthy travelers. James kept looking at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. As they passed below the mezzanine, our eyes locked one last time. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just held his gaze, letting him see the end of the line, letting him see the person he had underestimated for 28 years. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed. The view of the brick wall didn't seem so bad. It was solid. It was real. My phone rang. It was Mr. Norman. "They've been charged," he said, his voice crisp. "Fraud, embezzlement, forgery. The bail is set at a number they'll never be able to afford. Not anymore. The accounts are frozen. It's over, Ashley." I hung up and sat in the quiet of my apartment. For the first time, there were no frantic calls to answer, no financial fires to put out, no emotional messes to clean up. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. My father always said our family was built on a flawed foundation. James and my mother had just kept patching the cracks with my money and my loyalty. But now, the whole rotten structure had come down. I was standing in the rubble, completely alone and completely free. And for the first time, I was ready to build something of my own, from being exploited to seeing them face fraud charges. My family's rotten foundation crumbled, leaving me free. What did you think of my victory? Subscribe for more intense stories.